Hi everybody. This video is to study Egypt and what the Egyptians did in ancient Egypt with music. Why is there a cow? Well, because the story really starts back at the development of agriculture. Remember, we stopped being nomadic and following the animals around. And once we stayed in one place and started farming for ourselves, we developed civilization. Thousands of people living in cities, feeding themselves. We studied Sumer already, and we saw that now that the rituals were connected to harvest and not as much to chasing after the animals and hunting, and the sun and the water and the seasons and everything it took to plant and be successful, the animals were still important to our survival. So now we actually start to have animal gods and instruments that are performed at the rituals that have animal heads on them. And that the Sumerians are using scales, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, that sound pretty much like the scales we have today. But what they fall short on is that they can't come up with a notation system with real live notes like we're studying. And so they write instructions for the musicians with lyrics above. But we're here to study Egypt. And Egypt takes it to the next level in other ways. First of all, Egypt is going to have a height to its civilization of approximately 2,000 years. That is a very long time for any civilization to do so well. And they are going to have, for their government, a class system. That means whatever family you're born into and whatever job they do, you're going to do that job too. And there's no changing that. Their government, in order to keep order in society, had a pharaoh at the head of it. And they invent things too, just as we spoke about with Sumer. Their writing was called hieroglyphics and was much more picture-like. They also invent, yes sirree, paper from the papyrus plant. They crush and mix and stir in water and then flatten on a screen and let dry the papyrus plant, which is a fibrous living plant. When it dries, all the little fibers tie together in knots, and when you peel it up, you get paper, just like this came from a tree. Probably the biggest thing that we all think of is the pyramids, which took a lot of math. Yes, these people were very mathematical, and math is something that music is made from. So it makes perfect sense that these people are going to not only push forth music is a very big part of their culture, but they're going to flourish in the arts. What they didn't know how to do was foreshorten. So if you ever wondered why the Egyptian head and the body facing forward don't seem to make sense, and the feet look like they're running away from the body that faces forward and the head that's facing sideways with the feet, it's because they didn't know how to foreshorten, which is a way to shadow so that you can make a nose which sticks out forward look 3D on a flat surface. Remember, the Sumerians had everybody standing on each other's head in parade because they didn't know, like we do, that you have to show some sort of level of 3-dimension on flat surfaces. And the Egyptians used art and music so much that they had to overcome it. But they didn't know how to foreshorten. They didn't know how to layer. So all the heads and the feet are running away from the bodies that stand facing forward. Well, family was really important to them too. So because of that, And because they had developed irrigation systems, and they had a lot of people surviving together in the thousands for almost 2,000 years at their height, they developed these irrigation systems so that they could feed all those thousands of people. And music was a huge part of their culture. We finally see evidence in the Egyptian culture that it's just for fun sometimes. A lot of us thought music started because it was fun. Well, certainly caveman thought it was fun to bang things and make noises too. But for the most part, we've learned so far it was used for communication and part of rituals. And the Egyptians are definitely going to do that. Use it for communication and rituals. But they also have a lot of parties and festivals where they just enjoy music and dancing amongst the gorgeous silks and gold threads and beautiful adornments in this very artistic community that's very famous for building some of the biggest art ever so far in history at that time. They had a ton of different instruments, and they too did not invent a way to notate. Instead, their musicians depended upon chironomy, which basically meant that somebody stood in front of the group playing and used hand signs to tell the musicians what to do. Still not notation. Sumer, they use sentences. Egypt, chironomy. Oh, and let's not forget, the Egyptians also invent a very favorite Eastern culture instrument of mine, the nose flute. Yes, sirree, folks. You put it under your nose instead of at your lips. Interestingly enough, if you Google nose flute, you can still find people in the Eastern culture playing the nose flute today. So that's the basics of Egypt. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it because you've studied it in the past. Just remember the basic things, like they had a class system and invent paper. They didn't know how to foreshorten or shadow the way that you would to make a nose look real on paper. So that's why all the head and the feet running a different way from the body. And that the arts were very important to them, including music, especially centered around family. To the point where they actually used music to have fun, as part of entertainment, as part of their rituals, as part of communicating with each other. It was a very intricate part of society. That's it. That's Egypt. Quick summary, and we'll copy much more clear notes in class and discuss it briefly. Don't forget my favorite. That's right, the nose flute. Have a nice day, everybody.